Welcome to a new episode of Fighting Lines with Bryan Ciano. Thank you so much for joining me as we take another look at everything going on in the world of combat sports. Been a busy week plus for the combat sports world. We have a lot of reviews here. We have two different fight cards from last week, and we'll talk about, including UFC Fight Night Perth. We have the BKFC 81 card from Manchester in the UK. We'll also preview everything coming up this weekend. We got three different fight cards from three organizations. First off, we have the card over in Dubai for the PFL Champions Series, two titles on the line over in the Middle East. Then we'll come back to the U.S. We have UFC 320 out in Las Vegas, two titles on the line there. And we'll finish things up talking about BKFC 82 in Newark, New Jersey. Yours truly will be in the house for that one, as we have two titles on the line, King and Queen of Violence belts up for grabs with them. Lots of titles up for grabs, lots of fights, plenty of action for us to review and preview on this show. And then if we have a little time, maybe we'll get into some boxing news that came out this week as well. All that coming up on today's episode of Fighting Lines with me, Bryan Ciano. Well, to start things off on today's episode, let's talk about what we saw last weekend. And let's start off first with the UFC Fight Night in Perth, Australia. A big light heavyweight fight there for possible title contention was on the line. It was a big card for everyone over in Australia. Of course, they had to wake up a little early to go check it out because it was made for US times, where we got to see it normal time over here. But if you're in Australia, it's about 12 hours ahead. So you're getting up early on Sunday morning to go see some fights. Still worked out well for all the fans and the fighters involved, despite having a couple fights drop off at the last minute. Two fights within the last 48 hours before the card went off, including Justin Tafa, who we talked about last week. Previewed that fight. Unfortunately, it did not happen. He pulls out to illness, as does one other fighter on that card. So I have to shuffle things a little bit. Of course, Justin's brother Junior had pulled out a couple weeks before that with illness, so neither Tafa makes it. Still, things go off without a hitch for the UFC. Plenty of New Zealanders and Australian fighters on the card, and it worked out well for the fans because there were only two fights that wasn't won by one of the fighters from the local area. You had the very first fight on all the cards with Alexia Thainara winning her fight, and then later on you had Neil Magny getting the controversial win with his submission victory. Other than that, every other fight was won by someone from Australia or New Zealand. So even though they had to get up early, I'm sure they're happy to do it when they get those kind of results. Let's start with the main event. The headliner for this fight card was, of course, light heavyweight battle between number 3 Carlos Ulberg and number 7 Dominic Reyes. Ulberg gets the victory here, the first round TKO over Reyes. We thought Reyes might have been a live dog. We were wrong on this one because he didn't fight his fight. Ulberg was coming forward with this one, and Reyes seemed okay with that. He was backing up. He was letting the challenger come after him, respecting his power, worried about what he was going to do to him, instead of being the Dominic Reyes we know, who was aggressive, pushing forward, attacking his opponent. Instead, he let the fight come to him, and it paid off big time for Ulberg, as later on in the round, about 40 seconds left into it, both guys were throwing some kicks here or there throughout the beginning of it, but with about 40 seconds left, Ulberg catches Reyes with a nice 1-2 combo that drops him, jumps on top of him, throws a couple extra shots just for good measure as the ref gets in there and breaks it up, and Ulberg gets the TKO victory. He is now 14-1, and he wasn't going to rest on his laurels. He wasn't going to sit there and just enjoy the win. He's going to jump on a plane and head to Vegas because, of course, this week they're in Vegas for UFC 320 with that light heavyweight title on the line. So he said, I'm going to be cage side, and I'm going to make sure both those guys know I'm coming for them. Because obviously after this fight, you got to put him as the next in line for a title shot after we get the rematch between Ankalaev and Perreira too. So now we'll see which one of those guys wins, and if they could take on Ulberg in the next one. I mean, when you look at the rankings, when you look at what he's done, it seems that he has to be the next one in line, especially after a performance over a guy like Reyes, who's been a title contender in the past. So a great performance by him to be the main event and close out the show for all the local fans. Light heavyweight, before that, you also had Jimmy Crute versus Ivan Arslan. Now, we said Arslan was a big-time striker, a guy that, even though Crute had a bunch of KO victories on his record as well, maybe he wanted to, use the well-rounded part of his game and take it to the ground and try to win that way. He does. He gets the first round rear naked choke over Arslan, 3:19 into the first round. Both guys were throwing some good shots early, but it seemed like Arslan was getting the better of the exchanges a little bit. So what happens? Well, later on, Crute gets a hold of him, takes him down. As they get back up, he's still holding on to the back, maybe even gets his toes locked in the fence a little bit for leverage and to hold on and keep his opponent from tossing him around. Ref misses it, but Crute makes the most of it, gets it back to the mat on the back of Arslan. Right away, throws some punches from the back and slips a choke in pretty quickly and gets a tap at just over 3 minutes into the round to get the victory. He gets the TKO. He improves, probably gets his standing up there in that division as well. We'll see if he ends up with a number next to his name coming up soon, but a nice win for Jimmy Crute in front of his hometown fans. Then you had the featherweight battle between Jack Jenkins and Ramon Tavares. Jenkins gets the victory over Tavares by unanimous decision, 30-27 on two of the judges' scorecards, 29-28 on one of them. Round one, Tavares was coming forward early against Jenkins. Just halfway through the round, though, Tavares hits Jenkins with a body kick. Jenkins gets him right back with one to the head, continues with some good shots throughout the rest of that round. So I thought the head kick and the continued shots after that for Jenkins, even though he started on the back foot and kind of letting his opponent come to him, I thought he got that round 10-9. Round two, Tavares continues to come forward again, trying to push the action. They end up in the clinch against the cage where Jenkins takes an accidental knee to the crotch. Why is that a big thing? Well, because afterwards he seemed to turn it on in that round. He turned things around, started coming forward himself. Instead of letting his opponent come to him, he started pushing the action a little bit more, landing some good shots, and ended up in the control of the clinch with 1 minute left, where he gets some good shots in on Tavares. I thought Jenkins had another good round, 10-9 second time, so 20-18 going into that final round, where he gets the early trip takedown with just over 1 minute into the round, works top control. There's a bunch of things from there for a while. Eventually, Jenkins gets him back, and his opponent tries to get back up because he loses position. Tavares ends up on top, but it didn't really matter much. Tavares didn't do much while he was on top, just kind of stayed in the guard, eventually gets kicked off and thrown to the side. So I thought, again, Jenkins had the better round overall, more action when they were on the ground, more controlled time. 10-9 for him, 30-27 for me on my scorecard, as did some of the judges see it that way as well. After the fight, Jenkins was very emotional, talking about how he was worried after his last injury that it might be too hard to come back from. He didn't know if he was going to be the same fighter after that, but thanks to his team and his fiance, they really pushed him and supported him and got him to where he was, getting this victory in front of the hometown fans in Australia. So a great job by him. And we'll see what is next for him in this division. At welterweight before that, we had a bunch of controversy. You had Jake Matthews and Neil Magny, two longtime UFC veterans battling against each other. Seems like we could have had this fight for years now with how long these guys have been around this division, bouncing around, fighting some of the best guys. But Magny gets the win by darts choke in round 3 minutes and 8 seconds into the round. Why is that controversial? Because Matthews did tap. It wasn't a bad stop by the ref. Well, it's controversial because in round 1, they're going back and forth. Matthews pushing the action a little bit. Then Magny opens things up a little bit himself in the striking, starts to be a little more aggressive instead of letting Matthews come to him. With about 1 minute left in the round, Magny goes for the takedown and Matthews throws on a guillotine, but he can't hold on to it. Magny, being the veteran, gets to the side, doesn't let the pressure go on to him. Eventually, though, Matthews ends up rolling the position. He ends up on top, throws a triangle choke on Magny from the top with very little time left, and Magny's just trying to hold on, trying to survive. But then with 1 second left, as we're getting the bell, the ref jumps in and says it's over, claims that Magny was unconscious. Magny wasn't. And he said so right away. He said, no, I'm not out. I'm awake. We'll talk about what he said later on about what happened in that when he talked to the post-fight. But Matthews is celebrating. He thinks he's got the win because the ref said it was over. Magny says, I'm not unconscious, so why'd you stop it? So the ref says, all right, fight on. Now I can get why Matthews is upset. I mean, you think you get this win, you get that adrenaline dump. The ref stopped it. By the rules, it's over. Whether it was right of him to stop it or not, it should have stopped there, but it does not. It continues. We go into round 2. Fight on. Credit to Matthews. He rebounded right there and kept coming again at Magny, trying to attack. 40 seconds into that round, he backs him up a little bit with some good shots. Then Matthews goes for another guillotine on Magny when Magny was trying to take him down. Ends up on the back with 3 minutes and 30 seconds left on top of Magny. Then takes full mount and goes for the triangle choke a minute later. Again, trying to do his damnedest to get his opponent unconscious. Magny, being the veteran he is, fights through it, survives the round. Again, another round for Matthews here, 10-9, probably both of the first 2 rounds since he had Magny in trouble. So he's up 20-18 going into this final round. Magny knew that because he came out a lot more aggressive in that 3rd round. He's throwing more, trying to get early takedowns. Matthews goes for the guillotine choke again when Magny went for the takedown. Didn't work out. They end up in the clinch against the cage. Another time, Magny goes for the takedown, and Matthews tries to stop him. So he throws in a darts choke position instead. Now, Matthews escapes that, but later on, Matthews goes for a takedown. When he does that, Magny throws a choke on him, gets the darts choke position, locks it in tight this time, and just over 3 minutes into the round, Matthews taps, fight over. Magny gets the win. So a fight that seemed completely in Matthews' favor in the early going, that he gets the ref to stop it, whether Magny was out or not. It continues, and later on, despite attempts by Matthews to get submissions on other parts, and he had a good chance, Magny gets the submission victory over him. He's now got the second most wins in UFC history behind Jim Miller at 27, Magny with 24. Don't know if we'll ever catch him because I don't see either of these guys ever giving up. You have to take them out on their shield for sure. These just badass UFC fighters that will not give up their career. They want to keep going no matter how old or how long they fight. He's now 31-14 overall. In the post-fight, they asked him about that choke in the first round. You know, what was going on, what was going through his head. He said, listen, it was in deep. I knew I was in trouble, but then I heard the clapper and 10 seconds left. So I was just counting down in my head trying to survive. And then when I got to one in my head, I knew that the round was over. So I let go of fighting. And that's when he thought I was up, but I wasn't. So, I mean, I guess credit to the ref for letting it go. Although according to the rules, he should have stopped it. Magny took all the opportunity he could get out of that and got the win. Matthews obviously very upset about that, very frustrated. He says he's going to appeal. So we'll have to see what the local governing body does about that one. Do they overturn it? Do they make it a no contest? It would stink for Magny if they did, but I can understand where Matthews is coming from too in that one. It's not really him being a baby or anything like that. By the rules, the ref screwed it up. Then to open up the main card, you had the lightweight battle between Tom Nolan and Charlie Campbell. I was excited for this one. Both these guys doing great things in this division, 9 wins apiece, great records. Who was going to differentiate themselves and put themselves a little bit higher up in, you know, the possibility of getting ranked in this division? Well, that goes to Nolan. The local fighter gets the first round rear naked choke submission over Campbell, 408 into the round. Both guys are throwing out some kicks early on and some feelers, trying to get the other guy's timing. Campbell dropped Nolan with a left shot less than 1 minute in, but tells him to get back up. He didn't want to go and battle with him on the ground. Now, it's probably smart considering how this fight ends up going, because obviously Nolan gets the submission victory. So it was smart of Campbell to try to avoid the ground from him. But later on, both guys were throwing some good shots, and Nolan clipped Campbell with the right. Campbell kept coming, gets dropped down to a knee 10 seconds later before Nolan drags him to the mat, out of the clinch, right into back control. Drags him down right away, right into back control. Didn't have to work for it. Just got the great position, got the dominant position right away, and locked in the rear naked choke before Campbell could even really get his bearings there. Nolan gets a submission. He's now 10-1. First double-digit wins between those two. Gets his first submission victory of his career. Talked about how he just got awarded his black belt in BJJ and wanted to show it off. So congratulations to him for that, and the fact that he's going to be getting married. So he's going to take the rest of the year off to go do his wedding, and he'll be back in 2026. But unlike some of the other fighters earlier on the card who were saying, hey, I hear you got, a card coming up in Sydney, I want on that, or hey, how about you bring fights back to Melbourne? He said, you know what? I've had some good success here in Australia in front of my hometown fans, but let's get me out of here. Show me to the rest of the world. So he wants to go international in 2026. We'll see what is next up for Nolan with the UFC. But what's next up for us when we come back on Fighting Lives with Bryan Ciano is staying overseas, because we're going to make our connecting flight over in Manchester in the UK, where the BKFC had BKFC 81 last weekend with a title on the line here on Fighting Lives with Bryan Ciano. So as we make our way back from Australia, let's take a quick stop off, refuel a jet over in the UK, because BKFC had their fight card, BKFC 81 in Manchester last weekend. UK title was on the line, as was a former title holder in glove boxing making his debut for the BKFC. That was the headliner, James DeGale, going against Matt Floyd. It was a card full of action. If you like finishes, you got plenty of them on this card. 10 of the 12 fights ended by KO, TKO. 9 of those were in the first 2 rounds of the fight. 4 of those in the first round of the fight. So plenty of great finishes. Didn't take up too much time to go watch the whole card if you wanted to, because all the action was pretty quickly done for the BKFC, except for that last one. We'll talk about that first here. The main event, James DeGale versus Matt Floyd. While every other fight on the card was really good, really exciting, some great action, this one was probably one that most fans would like to forget, because it was ugly. All the negative stereotypes you're going to get about combat sports, especially about bare knuckle boxing, kind of reared their ugly head in this one between DeGale and Floyd. It just was ugly, prodding, not pretty, a lot of dirty stuff going on. So probably wasn't the highlight reel that the BKFC was hoping for when they brought in DeGale, but sometimes fighters make fights, and his opponent made sure that it was not a pretty fight, because it would have gone DeGale's way if it was. The guy was a 2008 gold medalist in boxing, of course, also a 2-time IBF super middleweight champ. We thought he was going to get a 3rd round TKO, because we thought that Floyd would come in here, try to make his name off DeGale, and try to make it a little bit of a dirtier fight, and he did. But it does go the distance, and DeGale wins by unanimous decision, 48-43 on 2 judges' scorecards, 47-44 on one of those. Right from the get-go, it was pretty rough. as Floyd comes forward right away, starts getting in the clinch, trying to make it, a dirty brawl against DeGale instead of being a boxing match, which probably would have worked out to his favor. But there was 3 different times in just the first 45 seconds of the fight where the ref had to stop the fight and tell him to follow the rules because he kept telling him, all right, stop, break, and more punches were being thrown, mostly by Floyd, but DeGale had his shots here, there, and that early going as well, and throughout the fight. But most of the round was just clutching, grabbing, ugly, not even nice clinch work for the most part because both these guys aren't used to that. And then at the end of the first round, bell goes off, and about a second or two later, while they're in the clinch, and the ref's telling them to break it up, Floyd throws a headbutt, an intentional headbutt into the head of James DeGale. Now, might even too, it looked like he kind of threw one and missed and then made sure he connected on the second one. So they have to be separated. DeGale's furious, as he should be. The ref jumps in there, grabs Floyd, tells him 2 points off, walks him around the ring, 2 points off to all the judges. So that takes it from what I probably would have had as a 10-9 round for DeGale and makes it a 10-7 round for DeGale. Just an ugly start to the fight. Honestly, I probably would have stopped it after that first round. Just DQ'd him right there. Not just because of the headbutt, because there was repeated warnings throughout the round. And it's only a 2-minute round. This guy's getting warned left and right. Stop being dirty. Stop throwing after he says stop. And he's trying to break things up. And then he throws a headbutt. He's obviously not listening. Should have just booted him right there. Instead, we go on. We get 4 more rounds of this. Now, in round 2, maybe the warnings were getting to Floyd a little bit early on because he's backing up. He's not trying to push on DeGale, not trying to make it a rough fight. But he catches DeGale, so jumps on him, chases him as DeGale goes back towards the ropes, keeps throwing. DeGale goes down to a knee, pops right back up, but it's ruled a slip. I watched the replay over and over. I didn't see him slip. I thought, maybe things got tangled a little bit, but I didn't think it was enough to knock him down. I thought there were punches thrown and should have been counted as a knockdown for Floyd, but he doesn't get that. So, unfortunately, that doesn't work out for him. They continue with DeGale bleeding from the eye a little bit. During the clinch work, Floyd was throwing some more uppercuts, some more dirty shots. When the ref was telling him to stop, he's still throwing before the ref gets in there and really gets in between the two of them. Back to clinching, grabbing with both of them bleeding. Some late shots by Floyd later in the round as well. And again, DeGale went down just before the end of the round, but that was ruled a slip as well. So 2 times DeGale went down in this round. Neither of them ruled a knockdown. So I still get around 10-9 to Floyd. I think he did a little bit more, had a little bit of an option where he kind of had DeGale in trouble in the beginning. So now it's 19-17 DeGale. Going into round 3 where Floyd throws a shot after the clinch right off the start. Right off the start of the round, they get in the clinch, throws a shot when the ref says stop, point taken away. That was the 3rd point taken away from him in the fight. DeGale would have one taken away as well in this round after he threw a punch after being told to break before, towards the end of the round. So now you have both these guys lose a point in this round. 4 points overall taken in the first 3 rounds. Just ugly, brutal. And after DeGale threw that punch, just after the round ended, Floyd had to be pulled away. He was furious, which is ironic. I mean, this is the guy being dirty the whole fight. Now he gets a little of his own medicine, and it's going to send him into a tizzy. Either way, I give that round 9-8 to DeGale because it could have been 10-9, but with both guys losing a point, it goes 9-8, and now it's 28-25 to DeGale. Round 4, DeGale was working the clinch a little bit better, starting to get used to a little bit more that every time the ref broke them up, boom, quick shot by him on Floyd. Not maybe the most powerful shots, but still getting in there, still making some points. Floyd was gushing blood from his nose during this round. Both guys ended up in the mat in a tangle at one point with the guys tripping over each other. Another ugly round, but I thought DeGale did a little bit here and there to get him at the point. 10-9 DeGale, 38-34 going into the final stanza, where it's DeGale has a good flurry in the early clinch, lands a few good shots throughout the round. Floyd has some shots, but DeGale had more. I give that one to DeGale as well to finish up 48-43 for me on my scorecard, just like 2 of the judges had it. I thought it was an ugly fight. It was terrible, It was not what the BKFC wants, I'm sure, when you go sign a major name like James DeGale, but that's what Floyd made it. Post-fight wasn't much prettier, though, because then DeGale's trying to explain why things weren't as he wanted them to be, and Floyd being dirty, and McGregor's in the ring and starts jumping in and talking about how, well, it's bare knuckle boxing. It's great. It wasn't great. It was ugly. When Floyd later is trying to say his side of the piece in the interview as well, then Conor's jumping into that, saying how it was a great fight and he loves him and he can't wait to see him fight again. If I was in charge, I'm tossing Floyd. Not worth it. Not what you want to see. Not the product you want to put out there. We'll see, though. Conor, of course, is a big owner of it, so we'll see if he keeps him around, puts him against someone else. And DeGale sounded like he was still going to hang around despite the ugliness of that fight. He said, I'm 1-0, and now I'm going to climb up these ranks. So we'll see what happens with DeGale in the future and what kind of fights they can put together for him. The great part of this, and the analogy I'm going to make for this fight, though, is Floyd walks out to the Star Wars theme, and he has a big back tattoo of Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker battling. It says the Jedi. There's other things on there, too. But I'm not going to compare this fight to the first three Star Wars movies, which are beloved by everyone. If you're going to compare this to one of those, I'm going to compare it to the first three, the prequels with Jar Jar Binks, where it's just hard to follow and understand. It's ugly, and no one really wants to watch it after you've seen it one time. That's how this fight was to me with Matt Floyd and James DeGale. Also at light heavyweight, you had a battle of the reality stars over in the UK when Aaron Chalmers and Jack Fincham met up. Now, Fincham was on Love Island, made his name there, making his BKFC debut here in this fight, had a bunch of amateur fights. Chalmers, a former MMA fighter, former glove boxer, where he went 1-1 in that, had his first BKFC fight back in April in Dubai, where he got a TKO win in the third round. Was also on reality TV over in the UK on the Geordie Shore, which, of course, for those of you who don't know, I believe is supposed to be the Jersey Shore, but the UK version. I've never watched any of that stuff, but that's what I've been told. So both these guys with some fame outside the ring coming in there and battling against each other. Now, Chalmers had a good right early in the fight that put Fincham on his bike a little bit, running around, circling, trying to avoid the power shots, because once he tasted that, he's like, whoa, I don't know. I don't like that. So Chalmers was chasing him the rest of the round, eventually caught him with a check left hook that dropped his opponent just 1 minute into the first round. He gets up after the 10 count, throws some little shots at Chalmers as he chases, but that round goes to Chalmers, 10-8. Round two, Chalmers is stalking Fincham. Fincham's trying to keep him away with the jab, trying to keep him at bay, not taste that power once again, but it only works for so long because right before the end of the round, Chalmers lands a good 1-2 with the cross, snapping Fincham's head back. He goes down to a knee a second later, a little bit of a delayed reaction, but eventually gets back up. The round ends, but you can see he just doesn't look right. Looks dazed, walking around a little bit off, gets to his corner, sits down, and as they're talking to each other, another 10-8 round, of course, for Chalmers. So now he's up 20-16. When they're called for the third round, the corner waves it off. They stop Fincham. They say, don't take any more of this. Not your night. And Chalmers gets the victory. Now he's 2-0 in the BKFC. He says he'll finish Mike Perry next year. Don't think they'll give him that fight right now, but still, he's calling for the big name, as everybody likes to do. Also called out someone in the crowd. I'm not sure who that was, but he's got some people on his list for sure after that victory. And Fincham says he will be back. We'll see what he does. Showed a little bit of spunk there, but it was just too much of Chalmers' power and technique to let himself go in there. And now Chalmers gets the victory and moves on. Then at lightweight, you had Johnny Graham versus Naveed Mansouri. This was apparently for the BKFC UK lightweight title. Didn't know that was happening before we got to that card, but good for these guys to get the chance. Of course, Mansouri, long boxing career. We talked about that. 1-0 in the BKFC after a first round TKO in April. 22-4-2 in glove boxing before this. Graham also had a boxing career, 5-0 in that one, had been 2-0 in the BKFC. His last fight was the loss for the welterweight title in the UK, losing that to Connor Tierney. He's now going for a different title in the UK, dropping down in weight, and it worked out pretty well for him. We're leaning towards Graham, but we weren't sure, obviously, with the new weight division and both these guys having good professional experience, what this was going to be. Well, it was Graham with a second round KO, 153 into the round. In round one, Mansouri was coming forward early. Graham was letting some good body shots. Both guys doing a little clinching, landing some tight punching early. Both land some good shots, about 45 seconds left into the round, but then Graham lands a 1-1-2 with a huge cross that dropped Mansouri with 30 seconds left in the round. He looks rocked. Gets back up, but even when he's walking around afterwards, this looks a little off, survives till the end of the round. That one's 10-8 Graham. Then you get to round two. Graham was coming right away, putting pressure on Mansouri. He tastes blood in the water. Mansouri goes down 25 seconds in, but it's ruled a slip. Takes his time getting up again. Graham keeps swinging, has some big misses there, but then lands later on with both guys in tight swinging, lands a big right hook. Mansouri goes down, and he's out. So after 3 seconds, the ref starts counting, and you can tell he's not getting back up. KO victory for Graham, as Mansouri can't answer the 10 count and get back up after another knockdown. Now, Graham credits his corner for his great performance, talks about how important they are, talked about he's at the level of the best lightweights in the BKFC, whether in the UK or the US. So obviously they have this tournament going on right now for that lightweight crown. We'll see if he gets his shot at one of those guys, whether he gets one of the losers in the first round of that to fight and prop himself up for getting a title shot later on, or if he waits and sees what goes on with all four guys before doing something. But obviously making a name for himself in that lightweight division over in the UK with that title now. Then at featherweight, you had Jono Chip Chase versus Louis Garside. Now, this was an interesting fight because Chip Chase had all 4 of his first fights in the BKFC end within the first round, never make it to a second round. Coming off his first loss to Gary Fox back in March. Garside won on the BKFC and won by decision in February. So I thought Chip Chase was going to get the first round TKO. He had a 4-inch height, 6-inch reach advantage as well, besides the power that we've seen from him. Hadn't seen much from Garside. Well, Garside's got some power too, apparently, and he knows how to use it. He wins by first round KO, 1 minute and 10 seconds into the round. Chip Chase was coming forward early, throwing some target shots, while Garside was kind of just standing there, almost flat-footed, waiting for his opponent's attack, looking for his spots. But then all of a sudden, 1 minute into the round, just flips it on its head. He attacks, throws a left hook, right cross. First one kind of dropped Chip Chase. The second one definitely finished him off. He goes down on the mat. He's not there. He's out. Ref stops the fight. Knockout win for Garside. Great job by him. The Leprechaun then pulls out the big leprechaun hat after the fight, sitting there doing his post-fight interview, although pretty sure he forgot to take his mouthpiece out because it's really hard to understand what he was saying. So I got nothing from that one, but a great performance. I got everything from that. All I needed to see was in what he did with those fists. Great knockout power for him against Chip Chase, Louis Garside with the great victory. Starting off the main card, you had a light heavyweight battle between Dex Spellman and Dawid Helinski. Helinski was unbeaten in other bare-knuckle promotions before coming to the BKFC, where he struggled, losing his first 2 before finally getting his first win in his last fight. Going against Spellman, who made his BKFC debut in March, got a decision win there. Wasn't sure how this one was going to go. Just figured let's watch the action and see what we can get from these two guys. And we got a great performance by Spellman as he gets the win over Helinski. Great job by him getting the win in the second round. He gets the TKO victory with some great power. Spellman was the bigger, longer guy. You can see Helinski kind of had to jump in and put himself at risk to really close the gap and try to land some stuff. I was having troubles with that early on. Even when he got in at 30 seconds into the fight, ended up knocking Spellman over. So that's ruled a slip. Nothing happened there, but later on, he gets tripped over Spellman's feet, gets back up, but should have probably stayed down because it just took some brutal beatings after that. Helinski comes forward, gives a counter left from Spellman that shakes him, has him running towards the ropes and covering up. Spellman chases after him, but he goes down to a knee to protect himself, not take more damage at that point, try to recover. Didn't do much because later on, he got him again, lands a big left hook, right hook combo that puts Helinski down with 30 seconds left in the round for the second time. Helinski gets back up. Spellman comes at him again. I don't even know if he landed much in the third exchange, but still, Helinski goes down for a third time in the first round. Probably should have just ended it there. The ref probably should have called it. They let it keep going. It's a 10-6 round for Spellman, and we go to the second round for whatever reason. Obviously, we saw Helinski just added his depth against Spellman in this fight, but we continue into a second round where he's coming forward, tries to put some pressure on, but he can't land. It's just too much of a gap. Every time he tries to close it, Spellman gets out of the way, gets saved by the rope 30 seconds into the round after Spellman throws some good shots on him, but the ref catches it. He says, you can't have that happen. If you're going down, you bounce off the rope, that's a knockdown. So that's the first one of that round. And then right after that, when he gets up, Spellman goes right after him again, drops him for a fifth time, less than 1 minute into the round. And Helinski just decides he's not going to answer the count this time. Finally realizes better of it. And after 5 knockdowns, Spellman finally gets a TKO victory. So a lot of great action, a lot of great finishes over there in Manchester. But before we come back over the pond and into the U.S. for some action this weekend, we got to take a little diversion over to the Middle East because the PFL has a fight card over in Dubai on Friday. All right, nice to recap all the fights we had last weekend, back-to-back cards there on Saturday, but we got more action than that this week. We got 3 cards coming at you. We have the PFL, Bellator, and the UFC all in action, all with belts on the line, multiple belts on all those fight cards. Let's start off first over in the Middle East in Dubai, where the PFL will have their Champions Series starting off on Friday. You're going to have a lightweight world title. Of course, this is a rematch. Usman Nurmagomedov versus Paul Hughes. These guys matched up for Nurmagomedov's belt earlier in the year on that Ireland-Dagestan card, where you had a bunch of fighters from both countries matching up against each other, and Nurmagomedov held on to that title by majority decision. Hughes, a 28-year-old from Ireland, is probably the toughest fight that Nurmagomedov has had so far in his career. 2-1 in the PFL, 14-2 overall in his MMA career, coming off a nice win over in Ireland, where he got to headline in front of his home country fans. After that fight against Nurmagomedov, a nice rebound from him, a quick finish of his opponent. Nurmagomedov, of course, a 27-year-old champion from Dagestan, was the Bellator champion, held on to that title, bringing it over to the PFL, defended it against Hughes, as we said. Of course, comes from a family full of fighters. His cousin Habib, longtime UFC champion before retiring and going towards coaching and running his team. His brother Umar, part of the UFC right now. He's got cousins of different names all over the place in MMA as well. So it's been a big family affair for the Nurmagomedovs and their brethren. And he continues that legacy right now, staying unbeaten, trying to continue to hold on to this title. We'll see if he can do that. Now, this first fight between him and Hughes, it was a good showing for Hughes, much better than I expected with the limited experience that Hughes had. But Nurmagomedov got better as the fight went on. So now you're going to give him more time in the cage with this guy and hope that he doesn't figure you out more. I'm not buying it. Nurmagomedov said himself, he said, this is going to be easier. I'm going to dominate him with my wrestling this time. You saw that. The first couple of rounds, he was feeling Hughes out, trying to figure out where he get in there. Of course, he has good stand-up game, but his bread and butter is, of course, dominating you on the ground. Started to follow that in the fourth round, and in the fifth round, it was all him. So now you're going to give him more time? He figured out that puzzle, and now he's just replaying the song and singing all the lyrics. He's going to get this win to me even more so than he did the first time. He's minus 174, so not a bad line for a guy who has been that dominant as a champion, going against a guy who he has already figured out. But if you want to play a different way, you want to get some value, you can go. For me, I like Nurmagomedov by submission, plus 390, because even though the books thinks it's going the distance, the juice for the total is over the 4.5. And it went to decision last time, but once you figure a guy out more, I think he's going to inflict some pain this time. I think he's going to put extra emphasis on this one so he doesn't have to face him again. I think, as we said, the grappling is going to come more into play here. He's going to throw him around a little bit, maybe even get some back control, start working him from behind with some punches. And then when Hughes covers up, throw in that rear naked choke. We've seen that many times from him before. I think we see it again. I like him by submission plus 390. Or if you want to get just less odds, but still have a better chance at winning because it involves either guy, then you can go the under 4.5 rounds at plus 120. I know he went the distance last time, but like I said, I think he finishes this before we go all 5 this time. Or, you know what, if Hughes gets a flash knockout, that's probably going to happen before that last 2.5 minutes as well. So I'm going under 4.5 at plus 120, or Nurmagomedov by submission at plus 390 if you don't want to just play him at minus 174 because that's too rich. Then another title on the line at light heavyweight when you have Corey Anderson battling against Dovlit Yagshimuradov. Now, of course, Yagshimuradov, the 36-year-old from Turkmenistan, just won the 2024 PFL light heavyweight title. 25, 7-1 in MMA, 7-2 in Bellator and the PFL. These last 7 fights have all been victories. Lost the first 2, have won the last 7, including that quick KO over Ulberg to win that tournament last November. But now he's going against the man who holds the full belt. This isn't a title belt. This is the guy who is the light heavyweight champion in Corey Anderson. The former UFC contender is 19-6 overall in MMA. He was the Bellator light heavyweight champion. So it got carried over here to the PFL. And now he comes back down to defend this title after just going up to heavyweight. He was supposed to fight Nemkov earlier this year. That fell apart. So instead, he fought Dennis Golstov just a couple months ago at heavyweight. He's going to have a 4-inch height, 6-inch reach advantage. And, oh, by the way, this is the rematch too. These guys fought back in 2021 in Bellator, where Anderson beat Yagshimuradov by a 3rd-round TKO. I don't see it going much differently here. Yagshimuradov is exciting. He's got some great power. But Anderson is a great grappler and knows how to negate his opponent's best stuff. So I think he's the pick here at minus 265. That's not great odds. It's pretty rich. So I wouldn't play it that way. I'm going to go value plays. Maybe you can go the over total rounds if it's sit at 2.5 and the juice isn't too bad on the over. Maybe you can go Anderson by KO TKO with some grappling leading to some ground and pound. The problem for right now, as I'm recording this, we don't have the odds out on that yet. So I'll try to update that on the socials. If you follow us, make sure you check out everything, and we will try to update you when those odds come out if it's good enough to hang with it. Then at bantamweight, you have a battle between Nurmagomedov versus Sergio Pettis. Pettis, a 32-year-old from the U.S., from out in Milwaukee, of course, the brother of Anthony Pettis, the former UFC contender. 24-7 in MMA, 6-1 in Bellator, 1-0 in the PFL after he beat Raytheon Stotts by decision in June. That was a tight fight that I thought could have went to Stotts, but the judges gave it to Pettis. Now he goes and tries to get 2 fights in a row on the win streak as he faces Magomedov, the 36-year-old Russian, 21-4 in his MMA career, 4-3 in Bellator, 1-0 in the PFL. He's coming off a win by decision in June over Hamadov. But if you look at some of the top-level opponents in this division, like Raytheon Stotts, who we just mentioned, well, Magomedov lost to him. Patchy Mix, Magomedov lost to him twice. So now he's fighting another guy in that kind of echelon, as Pettis has been a title holder before in Bellator. So can he do the same kind of things that he's done against other guys? Or is it going to be another situation where he kind of falters against a better fighter? I'm going to go with Pettis in this one because not only do I think that he probably wins this one, probably a tight fight, probably a decision because he goes through a lot of those. So you can check out what the odds are going to be for that when they come out. But even just straight up on the money line, he's plus 176. So there's some good value on taking Pettis here against Magomedov, a guy who has struggled against some higher level opponents. Also, at lightweight on the card, you have Archie Colgan versus J.J. Wilson. Now, Wilson from New Zealand, we just saw him in the PFL tournament this past year. Had a great first round win in April over Mads Burnell, some ground and pound there, but had to pull out because of injury. He's 11-1 in MMA overall, 9-1 in Bellator, 1-0 in the PFL. So most of his professional career has been in Bellator and the PFL against some tough competition. Going against Colgan, the fighter out of the U.S. who is unbeaten in MMA, 12-0, 8-0 in Bellator, 1-0 in the PFL. So another guy who had a couple pro fights and got right into the mix in some of the top promotions here with Bellator and the PFL and has done well with it. He's coming in off a decision win in June over Mansour Bornai. So now he's going to be going against J.J. Wilson and see if he can do the same kind of thing here. Wilson's going to have a 2-inch height and 4-inch reach advantage. But if you look at his record, look at the guys he's fought, he's had some trouble against some good grapplers. Had a grappling match against Aljamain Sterling recently that he lost to Rabadanov before. So he could struggle against a good grappler like Colgan, who has that in his background. Colgan is a heavy favorite, so the books like him too. Minus 295, Wilson plus 220. I'm not going to take the risk on Wilson there. I think that Colgan is the better fighter. I think he wins this one, but I'm not playing minus 295 either. So maybe you look at the total rounds or to end by points, because I think we end up in a decision type of situation here. So I think we look at both those when those odds come out. Well, we had some great action overseas in combat sports last weekend. Hopefully we get a great card on Friday as well with the PFL. But now let's talk about what we got coming up on Saturday, because you got two cards over here in the U.S. Saturday night's all right for fighting for sure. Lots of belts on the line. Let's start with the UFC 320 out in Vegas at the T-Mobile. Two belts on the line. Let's start with the light heavyweight rematch between Magomed Ankalaev and Alex Perreira. Now, of course, Ankalaev currently holds the title. Perriera, number one in that division, the former champion. Perriera, the 38-year-old Brazilian, was also the middleweight champion. Moved up to lightweight, where he won 5 in a row, including getting that title before losing that title to Ankalaev in their last fight. 12-3 in MMA overall, mostly by KO TKO, 9-2 in the UFC. Ankalaev, the champion, the 33-year-old Russian, 21-1-1 in his MMA career, 12-1-1 in the UFC. Has only been beaten by Paul Craig in his very first fight in the UFC. But these guys matched up, so we got plenty of tape on it. We don't have to say, well, what could have happened? What should have happened? We saw what happened. And it was a close fight. Perreira's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. Didn't seem to use that as much in the first fight as you would have expected with that great striking. But according to him, he wasn't 100%. In fact, according to him, he wasn't even 50%. Now, I hate when a fighter comes out after a fight, talks about being injured. But in his defense, it wasn't him that first reported. I think Rogan was the first one to break that news. And now he's been asked about it coming into this rematch. Said that he was about 40% of the time. That's not great. To put on the performance that he did at 40% against a high-level guy like Ankalaev, that's impressive, though. If that's legit and he was that banged up, then you could understand why he didn't look like himself. He wasn't attacking. He was letting Ankalaev come to him at times, wasn't pushing the action, wasn't as violent. So maybe that's because of the injuries. And if you bump up that experience and that greatness that he has, then that's not good news for Ankalaev. Because honestly, when I went back and rewatched that fight before this show, I had Perreira winning it 48-47. I had him getting every other round there. I had him 1, 3, 5. Now the judges scored round 3 for Ankalaev, but if you listen to the broadcasts, they were siding with me. You know, Daniel Cormier was saying that it was 2-2 going into that last round, which was a round for Perreira. So if you go by that, then he should have won that fight according to those guys too. So it was very tight, very interesting. If Perreira is better than he was in that fight, if he is back to his normal self, even just a little bit, that could be trouble for Ankalaev. So I'm taking the champ, not only because I think he's going to win the fight, but look at the price you're getting on him. This is a guy who's just been knocking guys out left and right, stopped all of Ankalaev's takedowns, even when he wasn't 100%, and he's plus 190. He's almost a 2-1 underdog. Give me the money there. Ankalaev minus 250 there, as far as the lines go, but I'm taking Perreira plus 190. Now, if you look at how the books are expecting this to go, they're kind of off on it, because the total for the rounds, for the fight, under 4.5 is where the juice is at minus 128. But Ankalaev, who is the favorite, his top way to win the fight, according to the odds, is by points of plus 145. So if he's going to win by points, how's it going under 4.5? It's not. It doesn't work out. If it goes under 4.5, Perreira's winning because he's going to get the finish. So I'm going to say that Perriera wins by KO TKO plus 270 for some value. But if you want to play a little safer and get a little less payout, but also gives you both instances of how this can go, you can say the fight will end by KO TKO minus 110 if you want to try that. Because both these guys have a lot of power. Both these guys have some finishes. So it could end that way. I'm sticking more with Perriera, though, with the KO TKO plus 270. Or maybe just playing it safe and just taking him at plus 190. So I don't have to worry about it if it does go over that 4.5 by some chance. Second title you have on the line on this card is Bantamweight, where the machine, Rob Dvalishvili, will take on Corey the Sandman Sandhagen. Dvalishvili, the 34-year-old from Georgia, of course, trains out in Long Island with the Sarah Longo team, 20-4 in MMA, 13-2 in the UFC. Like we talked about earlier with Yag Shamirodov, this guy lost his first 2 fights in the UFC and then has won 13 in a row since, including multiple title defenses. He's coming off a win over Sean O'Malley, who he beat twice. He just smothers you like a wet blanket. He's not the most exciting fighter at times. Sometimes it's just so frustrating to watch because he just takes you out of what you want to do. Takedowns, tosses, throws. The guy just beats you up, grinds you down. Has, even though he's from Georgia, he's very much that Russian Sambo kind of style, the Dagestani that we talked about earlier with the Nurmagomedovs. He's very similar in that way. And he's going to do that now to Sandhagen, the 33-year-old from Colorado, who's 18-5 MMA, 11-4 in his UFC career. Now, of course, he has a good ground game, so that might help him. Maybe he has some good takedown defense and use some of that striking that he has shown at times as well. He's coming off a win over Figueiredo, a very impressive win against a top-level contender there. He's well-rounded. He has different ways he can win this fight, but he lost to Umar Nurmagomedov, the former mentioned brother of Usman in the UFC, who has a very similar style to Dvalishvili, as we just talked about. So if you're looking at that, if you need another reason to believe in the machine, besides him just dominating people the last 13 fights, point to that as well. Kind of common style opponent that Sandhagen had issues with. Now, Sandhagen's going to have a reach and height advantage, but it doesn't matter when you're on your back. So I'm going with Dvalishvili. Not the easiest one to put in a betting card, though, because he's minus 390. The books agree with it as well that he is going to win this fight, almost a 4-1 favorite. So what do? Different way to play it? I think I'm going to go with by points, minus 160. 15 of the 20 wins for Dvalishvili have come by decision. Again, not always the most exciting, not the guy getting all these finishes, but still gets the victory. And if you play it that way, you still get the win. A little bit of juice there still you have to give up because obviously they know that he wins that way a lot. Obviously not the prettiest, not the most value play on the card, so maybe you just hanging around if you want to use it in parlays. But minus 160 is probably the best odds you're going to get because if you look at it, it's minus 310 to go over the 4.5 rounds of a 5-round fight. So obviously the book thinks this is going the distance. You get some value there at minus 160 instead of the minus 390 if you're just picking by points and decision, but still not the sexiest pick, not the greatest odds to win a big amount of money on it. But Dvalishvili, the machine, I think continues to hold on to this belt. Before that, at light heavyweight, you have a battle between number 2, Yuri Prochazka, and number 4, Khalil Roundtree Jr. Now, this fight might have been a top contender fight, a fight for who gets the shot at the title, at the winner of the main event, had we not seen what Ulberg did in Australia last week. These guys have both been to the top of the mountain before, fighting to get back up there, trying to step over the other one to get back to the top and get another title shot. Roundtree, the 35-year-old American, is 15-6 in MMA, 11-6 in the UFC since he came into the organization through the Tough Series back in 2016. Coming off a win over Jamal Hill before that. He lost to Perriera back in last October when he got his shot before getting that win against Hill. He had won 5 in a row in the division before that. Another guy who kind of wants to grind you down, get you against the cage, just use that clinch work and frustrate you throughout the fight. We'll see if he can do that against Prochazka. The 32-year-old Czech is the complete opposite. He's the exciting striker. He's the guy that wants to get the finish, get the knockout, because he's gotten a lot of those in his career. The former risen light heavyweight champ is 31-5-1 in his MMA career, 4-2 in the UFC, but both those losses in the UFC were to Alex Perreira, another great striker. So if he's facing a guy that can maybe meet him pound for pound, power for power, he could have some issues. That's not the case against Roundtree. He's going to have a 3.5-inch reach advantage as well to try to keep his opponent at bay, keep him at distance, and use those great strikes to get the finish like he likes to do. He is the favorite here at minus 184. So again, you got to lay some juice if you want to get the win. That's the way I'm going as far as who's going to win the fight. As far as the better bets, well, Prochazka by KO TKO is plus 110. 27 of his wins, 27 of 31 are by KO TKO. Roundtree, half of his losses, 3 out of the 6 are by KO TKO. So if I'm going with Prochazka, I'm going with him to win by finish, and you get a little bit of plus money there. You could also have the double chance, bets that you can do where you can get him by KO TKO or submission at 125. I definitely wouldn't do that. He's not a submission guy. You get him by KO TKO or points at minus 150. So as you can see, either way, including a KO for Prochazka is juiced. If you want to go just KO TKO, that's where you get a little bit of plus money. And that's, of course, his method that he loves to use the most when he finishes a fight. Also on the card at featherweight, you have a battle between number 8, Josh Emmett, and number 9, Youssef Zalal. Zalal, the 29-year-old from Morocco, 17-5-1 in MMA, 7-3-1 in the UFC. 4-0, though, in his second go-around, because this is the second time he's been with the organization. Struggled in the first time, now has come back and won 4 fights in a row in the organization, 3 of those 4 by submission since he has returned. He's going to be 4 inches taller, 2 inches longer, going against Emmett, the 40-year-old from Arizona, who, of course, now lives out in Sacramento training at Team Alpha Male, 19-5 for his MMA career, 10-5 in the UFC. He's lost 3 of his last 4, but they've been against top-level guys, Yair Rodriguez, Elias Topuria, LeRon Murphy. So, it's been to the best of the division that he's lost. Is Zalal in that category? According to the book, he is. They have him at minus 440. That's one of the bigger favorites on the card against a guy like Emmett. Now, Emmett's plus 310. I mean, you give me that kind of odds on a longtime vet who knows ways to win, who has, a couple different ways he can get this fight into his favor. I know he's lost a bunch, but against an up-and-comer like Zalal, does he be the gatekeeper role that shuts it in his face? I can see that. Maybe you throw him on your card with a little bit of money here or there to try to pump up some winnings if he gets that upset, or maybe you throw him in a parlay just to boost the odds a little bit and see if you can get that. Not the worst play I've seen, but maybe be safe. You could also play something else like the under 2.5, which is plus 215. The over 2.5 is minus 300. To go the distance, minus 235. Points, minus 250. So obviously, they think this is going all 3 rounds. If you want to get some value, you could try the under 2.5, or you can take a chance on Emmett. Just make sure you're not putting the whole bankroll on it for sure. Lastly, at middleweight, you have number 14, Abus Magomedov versus Joe Pyfer. Magomedov, the 35-year-old Russian, 28-6-1 in his MMA career, 4-2 in the UFC. His former PFL fighter has won 3 in a row. Going to have a 3-inch reach advantage on Pyfer. His opponent from South Jersey/Philly area, 29-year-old, is 14-3 in MMA, 5-1 in the UFC. Came in through the Contender Series. His only loss in the UFC is to Jack Hermanson. Won 2 fights since then, including Kelvin Gastelum in June by decision. So, beat some top-level guys. The heavy favorite at minus 216. I don't know if I believe in that much to throw that kind of juice on there. Maybe you go with the fight ends by points at plus 165. That's how I'm looking, because both guys have a bunch of KO, TKO victories, which of course is getting the book to lean that way. But they had a decision in their last few fights. So as they've stepped up in competition, they've kind of gone the distance a little bit. So maybe these guys both end up in a situation where they're feeling each other out a little bit. Maybe you go deeper into a fight, and Pyfer is the big favorite. I don't know if I love that one. I'll take a chance on fight ends by points at plus 165. So that wraps things up in Vegas. Let's come back east and go a little earlier in the day, where we get a big card for the BKFC making their first trip into the New York area on BKFC 82 in Newark. All right, well, before you get to UFC 320, there's some action earlier in the day in the New York area, out in Newark, BKFC 82, the first time they'll be in the New York area. Yours truly will be in the house for the first time watching some BKFC action, and watch plenty of other fights for a lot of organizations. First time that I'm going to see the BKFC do their thing in person, and we'll see what the crowds are like there. They have a great card, 2 titles on the line there as well. It's going to be on DAZN earlier in the evening, so you can check that out before you check out the UFC fights if you want. Headlined by the middleweight fight for the King of Violence belt between Platinum Mike Perry and Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens. Perry, the 34-year-old from Florida, currently holds this title. He is the King of Violence for the BKFC, 5-0, unbeaten in the BKFC so far in his career. The former UFC vet had a 14-8 career MMA record, but has been unbeaten since coming into BKFC, beating guys like Julian Lane. Got stronger as the fight went on, so might have been in trouble if they went to a 6th round. Against MVP, where he did go to a 6th round, although I thought the ref screwed that up and MVP didn't get credit for a knockdown. That would have changed the scoring there. Luke Rockhold, who he knocked his tooth out and made him quit. Eddie Alvarez and Thiago Alves back in April. So he also has his own boxing promotion, that Dirty Boxing that he has started. He is a lover of fight sports, lover of, some dirty fighting, and he's going to try to do that as well here as he goes against Little Heathen Stevens, a 39-year-old from Iowa, who was unbeaten in the BKFC as well. 3-0 for him. Longtime UFC vet, also fought the PFL, 29-22 for his career. Over 50 fights. That is just crazy. He beat Jimmy Rivera in his first fight. It's a tough one. Doctor stopped that one. I thought it was a little bit premature, but also beat Bobby Taylor by unanimous decision, and then beat Eddie Alvarez in Philly in January. So he's been getting better and better as he got more fights under his belt in bare knuckle fighting championships. And now he takes on Mike Perry. This is a tough one. Now, Little Heathen is a badass. He has shown that he's tough as they come. So is Mike Perry. Mike Perry just keeps winning, though. No matter what I think of his style, no matter what, every time I pick him to finally lose a fight, think he's against a better fighter, he ends up coming out on top. And then this one, again, is another situation where he's fighting a smaller guy. Jeremy Stevens was a 145, 155-pound fighter. Now he's coming in here against Perry, who's a bigger guy. So he's going to have the advantage physically, size-wise, strength-wise, I'm sure. And I'm going to take Mike Perry to go to 6-0 and continue to hold the King of Violence belt here for the BKFC. Then you have the women's battle for the Queen of Violence belt between Christine the Misfit Perriera and Jessica the Black Widow Borger, who we had on the show last week. Perriera, 125-pound champ for the BKFC, 10-1 in the BKFC, has cleaned out the division over and over. Everyone that has come has gotten quickly dispatched at 125. She's coming off a fourth-round TKO victory over Christine Vichen's last December on an 8-fight win streak, holds records for the most title defenses for women in the BKFC, tied for record of the most wins for women in the BKFC. She is the face of the women's division for the BKFC for years now. One of them, of course, Britain Hart is in the mix as well. Plenty of wins for her, but the Misfit has just been unbeatable for most women in this organization. Now taking on Jessica Borger, who is a champ at 145. You heard Jessica tell us last week they're going to be meeting at 138 for this Queen of Violence title. Well, 137 with 1 pound allowance, so basically 138. Borger is only 3-0 in the BKFC, but doesn't have many opponents up there in that 145-pound division, so hasn't been able to get as many fights as Misfit has been over the last couple of years. All three of her wins, though, have come by first-round stoppage. First one ended in 115 into the fight, second one 41 seconds, and the last one 32 seconds, where she dropped Hannah Rankin with the first-ever KO in BKFC women's history. So she has been getting better and stronger throughout her couple fights here with the BKFC and looks to do it again against the smaller Christine Perriera. This is a tough one because Perriera is another one that you can't pick against. She just beats everybody left and right. What worries me is what I talked about with this last fight for the King of Violence. The size is going to be a problem. Perriera is a badass. She's tough. She has finished women left and right with a lot of TKOs. She's a big volume puncher. She has some power, but she overwhelms you. Is that going to work against Borger, who's going to be bigger, who's going to be stronger, who's used to fighting bigger opponents, who's used to taking more powerful shots, and who has shown that she could finish women herself? I don't know. Either way, this is going to be an awesome fight. I can't wait to watch it. Can't wait to be in the building for it. This might be the fight of the night, and probably should be, probably will be the fight of the night between Jessica Borger and the Misfit Christine Perriera. Also at lightweight, you have a battle of Mike Trinzano versus JC Corazon de Leon. Trinzano, the 33-year-old from New Jersey, of course, a teammate of Jimmy Rivera's, former UFC fighter and tough winner, is 1-0 in the BKFC after he made a great debut against Louis Lopez last May. Hasn't fought since. We got the first-round TKO against the former title contender there, going against De Leon, the 26-year-old from Texas. He was also an MMA fighter. 2-3 record there. He made his BKFC debut years ago, back in 2021. Got a second-round TKO, but then went back to MMA. Then came back and got a third-round TKO over Ruben War in June in Texas. So he's got 2 fights, but a couple years apart, but one recently, of course, against Ruben War. Is a tough dude, so you got to give him respect as he goes against Trinzano. This is going to be an interesting one to watch. Both these guys have power. I'm not making a pick. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it. Another guy who also has power, but sometimes puts himself in danger, is Pat Sullivan. He is a 26-year-old from Philly, 1-1 in the BKFC. Of course, the huge fan base that he has down there were cheering for him both those fights. In the first one, he got caught quick by Tomlinson Jr. with a 37-second KO. Then he came back, and he got a 15-second KO against Peterson in July. So either way, make sure you're watching and don't blink because this fight could be over pretty quick. Bushaw, the 44-year-old, is 2-1 in the BKFC. He's coming off a KO loss to Caruso last October in Myrtle Beach. So Sullivan's dangerous. Bushaw is as well. I'm going to go with Sullivan in this one. He's going to have a height and reach advantage, which, of course, is big time when these guys are standing and trading. And we've seen that power from him. Bushaw's a tough fighter. We've seen some great fights from him as well, but Sullivan's been a lot more active. He's younger, and we've seen some great power from him recently. So I think he's going to win. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into another episode of Fighting Lines with Bryan Ciano. Just such a loaded fight. We didn't even get to all the boxing news, running out of time here. I mean, we got Canelo and Crawford news since their fight. We got another big deal for Paramount paying out for some combat sports. Maybe we'll throw a little bonus episode your way later in the weekend if we have some time, but might not with all this great action we have. So many fights to talk about. We'll recap all those next week on the next episode when we talk about the PFL Champions Series, what happens in Dubai with those two titles. We'll recap UFC 320 and those two titles online, as well as BKFC 82. Find out who are the king and queen of violence out in Newark. All that coming up next week, as well as a preview of the UFC Fight Night in Brazil between Oliveira and Gamrot. Those are going to be some great fights to talk with you next week as well. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you click subscribe and like on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Rate us. Talk about the show. Tell your friends. Get everyone involved. For Fighting Lines with Bryan Ciano. We'll talk to you next week.